So I think we managed to get people in now. Just a minute before we start, I figured since there was a lot of people waiting in the lobby, we might as well be nice and let you guys in. So while we wait for the clock to turn to 4 p.m. here in Stockholm, I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping rules. First of all, we really appreciate questions. I think this webinar is going to be a lot better if you share as well any experience you have. So feel free to do that in the right-hand corner of your screen. There should be a place where you can add your questions there. We will probably take most of them at the end, but if there's something that pops up and is super relevant to the discussion, I might jump in and add the question there. I'm also just going to start a poll. So you can answer that while we are waiting for the last people to arrive, and then I'm gonna make sure that we share that in the end. So I think that you have the poll available to you now, and I'm just gonna let that stay for a couple of minutes while the final people arrive, because I can see there's still people coming in. So that's that. Also, let me just say welcome to those of you who are already here. We are going to talk about data and how to utilize it to grow your marketplace. And I think most importantly, how to make sure that you pick the right data. And then one thing that always bothers me a lot when I look and read about data-driven growth is that there's a lot of high-level advice, but there's never any actual tangible examples. So what we try to do is we try to find and utilize examples either from our clients, from AppJobs Institute themselves, or from examples that we found around when looking around and doing the research. So hopefully this is going to be quite a tangible experience. And that's the goal, at least. And that's also one of the reasons I said, if you guys have any examples that you can share, feel free to do that, because that's just going to be even more helpful and make it more useful for everyone, I think. So I think I'm going to close the poll in a couple of seconds. Just make sure that you answer it if you haven't already. And then we'll get started with the webinar. And going once, going twice, closing. So back to the actual webinar. And as I said, I'll share the poll at the end of this webinar so we can see. As I said, this is applying a data-driven approach to help your marketplace grow. I have Natalia from AppJobs Institute with me. Just a small introduction to myself. I have been working at Bezedo for 8 years now, I think. Been working in a lot of different roles. Now I'm the global marketing manager, but I also worked in BizDev, and that's where I got a lot of experience for data collection and utilizing it for growth from, and also, of course, from looking at our clients and what they are doing and how they are utilizing our data to improve their own business.
Hi everyone, my name is Natalia Cieslak, and I'm the director of the AppJobs Institute. At the same time, I'm the head of member growth at AppJobs. Before, I was responsible for the product development, so a lot of data, lots of insights from many sides of the company. I'm super happy to see people joining here and to talk about the data-driven approach and how to apply in case of the AppJobs to the marketplaces. I hope you will find it very useful.
So here's kind of the agenda for today. And I'm just going to go over it because we're going to go into details with it. So if we want to look at how to decide on KPIs and data points, how to track it, and how to apply it. And we're just going to jump right into that. There we go. So first of all, what do you need to know? That's very, very important, because right now I see a lot of people who are kind of overwhelmed with the amount of data, and what they're trying to approach it from the wrong direction. So they have this enormous pool of data that they are trying to figure out what to do with, rather than going in and deciding on the data that they need and then from there extrapolate to figure out the questions or the answers to the questions that they are looking at. And I think this is historically because back in the days before the internet and before all of the computer powers that we have now and all of the great data collection tools we have now, it was you had to mine for data, right? You had to make sure that you got as much data as you could, and it was really hard to get. And the further we've gone into the age of technology, the easier it is to get a lot of data, but it's just overwhelming. I know from my own work that, you know, you can spend an entire workday just looking at data and never getting anywhere because there's so much to look at. So that's really, really important to kind of turn that on its head. Instead of saying, I need to look at my data and figure out what the solutions to my problem is. Sit down, figure out what you want to solve first. So the first step to that is, of course, picking a growth goal. So what could be a growth goal? I will let Natalia answer that in a second with some examples from AppJobs. But it's important that you kind of approach it, set a goal. This is what I want to grow. This is where I want to grow. Then the second part is to break that down, because it can be really, really intangible if you have a growth goal that says, I want to earn more money or I want more users. You have to bring it down into, okay, so how can I actually achieve that? So for step one, to get more users could be one thing. Step two, step three, step four. And once you have that, you need to drill down even further. So if I want to achieve X, how can I track that? How can I make sure that I achieve X? So first of all, you need to, of course, track the thing that you want to achieve, but also figure out, okay, so what are the sub goals? What are the non-obvious KPIs? What are the actionable KPIs? And I'm going to give some examples about that in a second, but I'll let Natalia give her examples from AppJobs first, because I think it's really interesting to have something real. So go ahead, Natalia.
Okay, so continue what Sigrid mentioned about the growth. Like any startup, growth is our biggest strength and at the same time our greatest challenge. So growth for AppJobs, just to give you a little context, means providing as many job opportunities as possible to as many gig workers as possible. And we track KPIs related to our cooperations with gig platforms and at the same time the acquisition of new gig workers. We have some standard KPIs like new signups by gig workers, but we always try to break them into more actionable metric, or what we like to call it a scorecard. Most importantly, whatever metric we decide to measure, we always make sure that we are aligned to current business strategy. To give you an example, we can look at signups for gig workers. For this, we take into account the number of signups we have per channel, and taking SEO measurements. For example, we measure the average position for best performing keywords, domain authority, conversion rates, etc. But we also have some less obvious KPIs that are more connected to a business. And they are, for example, the number of newly added cities, which is corresponding to how fast we scale our business, return of investment for some different territories, various segments, or dwell time, which corresponding to the content quality. In my opinion, there is no one answer to what is worth to track. I would say everything, because you can have older data that can prove to be very useful later. But you have to build a framework of your current KPIs and business strategy to make sure that you are tracking the right metrics that will benefit your business both the long and short term.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can't focus on everything at once, even though it would be nice. So you can't really, like, even though you can you can track everything. You can't do anything about everything at the same time. I don't know any company who has the resource to do that. So it's really, really important that you figure out where is it currently I really need to grow, and what kind of data do I need in order to achieve that. So here's an example from online marketplace. Of course, let's just take one of them. I don't want to go through all of the text, but let's say that the growth goal right now is something big, like we want to have 100,000 more users in a year. It's a huge goal, right? How do you kind of figure out, okay, so how do you achieve that? There's a number of things that you could do. Let's say that one of the things, one of the things that you could do is to make sure that the people who actually land on your page convert better. So in order to achieve that, you need more signups. You can track how many more signups you do get based on the changes you do. One of the non-obvious KPIs would be a bounce rate, because well, obviously signups converts means that you have converted more, but bounce rate could mean that people who would be able to convert hasn't converted. So that's a number that you can then look at and say, okay, so how can we improve that? And then you drill it down even further to something that's very actionable. So you have a hypothesis and say, okay, so maybe people bounce either because the quality of the content on the landing page isn't of the level that they expect, or it's not relevant to them. And then you can start actually digging into those things and changing and tweaking those small things. And then it goes all the way back up, right? Because you make a change here on your hypothesis or your actionable KPI, and then you look at, does it impact the bounce rate? Does it impact the signups? Does it mean we convert better? And does that actually mean we get more users? So all of this kind of goes down, but it also goes up. But I think it's really, really important that you drill it down and you look at the things that might not be super obvious, because then you can start figuring out a little bit of like a more growth hacking approach to things as well. So the next step, obviously, once you have decided on the data, or maybe for some this will be the first step, but just to make it flow in this presentation, the next step is how you want to track this. And we don't want to go too much into tools because there's a ton of different tools that you could utilize, and I'm sure you guys are utilizing different things already, but we just want to make sure that you think about this, because it's an important step, and how you track also impacts how you can look at the things and compare it. So Natalia, I know that you have a set way of doing it in AppJobs. Do you want to elaborate?
Sure. In AppJobs, we use some external tools to measure the KPIs, but usually they are only extension of some of our data set in database. So our database in general is the heart of our ecosystem and whole product portfolio, which is why also everyone in the company needs to know some basics of SQL to be able to read those data. We depend on a couple of sources to track our data. Giving you as an example, we do usability tests and surveys. We have integrations with third parties and our partners. We tracked user flows, behavioral data, standard events with Google Analytics also. We rely on user-generated content, both by gig workers and gig platforms, which we gather on the website or on the mobile applications. We run really a lot of A/B tests that provide us with clear information about user preferences. We also ask directly gig workers, and all those sources provide us with really rich and diverse insights. Storing all those records in our database gives us full freedom to analyze it. So again, we collect the data from gig workers, job seekers that use our platforms, gig platforms that have integration with us, and data platforms that collaborate with us, for example, OECD or Oxford. So As I said, we source data from different services that we integrate with AppJobs, and those services are, for example, finance services or tax services. With user consent, we integrate the Gig Jobs account with our reward program. Additionally, we run also the test with our members, like a quality test. So what I wanted to say is that it's very important to have data from many different sources, and it's very, very important to mix quantity test with quality test. And all this, what I mentioned, charge our database with new data.
Just a quick question here. How do you aggregate that data then to, because that's going to give you data that is coming in a lot of different formats, not just technical formats, but also answering the same question, but in different ways. So how do you aggregate it to make sure that you get all the answers to the same question in kind of the same place and can extrapolate that to utilize and grow your business?
To visualize some data, we very often blend them to, for example, Google Data Studio. Yes, if we compare the quantity and quality test, it really depends what the questions we are trying to answer. Yes. If we measure just simple user preferences, I will go for the quantity test based on A/B tests. But how the people see, for example, your new product, maybe you need to make the direct interviews.
Yeah, makes sense. A couple of years ago, I did an actual qualitative test where we pulled in some people and we had them review a lot of different marketplace sites, and we asked them to find different things just to see what they kind of were stumbling on, and it was really interesting. But some of the most interesting things that they found was really hard to verify with the quantitative tests. For instance, there was one guy who was really annoyed with commercials. There was one of the marketplaces who had a lot of commercials in between the actual listings. And I'm sure that it's possible to set up a good qualitative test or quantitative test for that. But I think that's something that is like, to your point of having a lot of different ways to get the data in. That's something that will come out much easier if you actually just sit down and watch someone utilize your product. So that's a good point. I just think it's really important that when you do that, you have also found a way of tracking that, because what I've seen happening sometimes is that you do these tests and then the people who do the test come up with some sort of conclusion, but all of the findings are not tracked in a good way, so you can't return to that and kind of drag other conclusions on it when you do other tests or you do other bigger surveys. So how do you deal with that, if you can elaborate a little bit on that?
I don't know if I have the answer for your specific question. I can give you maybe another example, what happened at AppJobs. For example, when we met some quality tests on our users, we found out that they have this perception of the product as a governmental. Yes, this you cannot get from the quantity test. So they very often, because of this, they misunderstood what is really the AppJobs. Another example was that on some places, the wrong exposure of the number of the reviews thought that the people thought that we are not really having any other users besides them, because no one is populating user-generated content. Yes, so we exposed more reviews. You cannot find it out based on quantity.
Yeah, exactly. It's impossible to dig into that, but you also need the quantitative test to actually then fill the other question that might arise from that in terms of user experience.
Yeah. Yes, usually they are just complementary.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of a segue, but I just wanted to kind of make sure to mention that it's really, really important, if you can, try and compile all the data. At least that's kind of the reason or the reasoning behind how we develop Implio, is that we want to make sure that we can compile as much data into the same tool as possible, because it is a lot easier to compare data and to extrapolate from it if you have it all lined up in the same place. So I think that's kind of, I know a lot of companies also use Mixpanel. I haven't used it myself, but I've heard good things about it, just to make sure that you have all of the data in a nice, easy to read dashboard. Then it's easier to actually make some good conclusions from it. So let's move on to how do you apply the data. I was gonna say that this is the most important thing, but I actually think, considering everything, that the most important thing is to make sure that you decide on growth goals and set the KPIs first, because otherwise you can't get to this step, right? So one of the things you can do in order to apply the data you have is that you can change the messaging focus point. And so I was really happy when I was doing the slide, because there was the best example I felt in the world with Airbnb, who has gone from, you know, talking about going on adventures in the world to nearby getaways and the online experience that they are pushing right now. Then when I was thinking about it a little bit more, I realized that this is probably not as much data-based as as a projection based on well, it is data as well, of course, but more like a reaction to the coronavirus, of course. But then Natalia had a good example from AppJobs, so I'll let you take that away.
In AppJobs, our primary goal is to automate our processes and have systems that will match the best tools, jobs, services with our user. Practically anyone can be AppJobs member. So the user segmentation here is like a never-ending story. On top of everything, we are like in 40 countries, 600 cities. We have 2 web applications, 3 mobile applications. So it's really a lot of content to display in different contexts. So AppJobs change the messaging pretty often. So we display different and the most relevant content based on all data that I mentioned before. So users can see really different jobs and services every time.
Yeah, I think that's a good example, and I'm assuming as well that you base a lot of this on the user behavior data that you're gathering.
Yes, also. We try to get as many informations upfront from the users. Obviously, this is nothing obligatory, but we need that, and we want this for them to obviously propose them the best content for them. But if we cannot have it, we try to find it out by ourselves and other data.
Then the other thing you can do, I'm just trying to speed up a little bit because I want time for questions, but I also want to make sure that we get into these because these are really interesting, especially this slide. So one of the things that you can also do based on your data, and when you see what the problem is because you have tracked it, that's implementing new services and improved experience. And of course, this is a great way to grow your app, but you have to have some good data to know which direction to go in. So here you had a really good example, which I loved. So go ahead.
As I mentioned at the beginning, our goal is to provide the job opportunities for the gig workers, but we are also here to support them. So for example, based on data provided by gig platforms, we know that the gig workers need liability insurance for cleaning jobs in some locations. We could see from gig workers that many people indeed try to apply for those jobs. So we could so we found and enabled for them insurance on demand to make it easier for many gig workers to get access to cleaning jobs. Another example is our brand new reward program, and by gathering gig workers data from different gig platforms, into one AppJobs account. We have built a reward program which provides extra coupons for gig workers when they collect enough points by completing gigs. So that's how you can use the data to make the extension of your product or extension of the value proposition for the users.
That's fantastic. I have an example from online marketplaces where I know that people were seeing that users would not buy items because they felt it was a hassle to have to either go to the place and pick it up or to arrange the shipping between themselves and the person selling it. So there are online marketplaces who then implemented delivery services, and obviously now with the whole global pandemic, that's being implemented more and more. But that was also based on the data where they saw that there was the people were losing out on sales because people just couldn't be bothered to arrange the whole pickup situation. So that's another place where you can really apply. So why did we lose the sale? Well, that's probably one of the reasons. Then you go into kind of the hypothesis and track. Okay, so now that we have implemented the delivery services, are we seeing more sales? And the answer is then yes, you see more sales and conversions that way.
Yes. This is maybe the example when both quantity and the quality test work. The insurance we find out mostly because of the information provided by gig platforms. But for example, need about the taxes is what gig workers told us that during interview, that this is big hassle for them, and we could understand this from quality tests, for example.
That's fantastic. Did you have any supporting data before that made you go out and actually ask these questions?
About taxes, not. About the insurance, it was one of the data that the gig platforms provided as resources needed to gig worker to start some jobs. So insurance was a data, taxes was the result of talking with the gig workers.
That's good insight. I think it's really nice when you see it kind of the step-by-step process of going from data to implementing a service that then makes your service or more attractive to people and then grow based on that. So here's an example from marketplaces again, and this is one of our clients. Change and improve processes is obviously something that can both save money and also make it more attractive to people to actually visit your site. So one of our clients, when we were working in the back office, we saw that we saw an inflow that a lot of the ads were coming in at the same time in the morning. So within a very short time frame, a lot of listings were sent in, and that obviously made a spike in our data. So we went in and we thought, that's curious, let's have a look at that, because data anomalies are always something you should look into, right? So we went in, we looked at it, and we looked at the listings that were actually being placed, and what we saw was that they were spam ads. So we obviously forwarded this information to the client, and they implemented a process where you can't put in too many ads within the very short time frame. What then happened was that because of this, they saw a decline in customer inquiries and reports, which of course meant that they saved money on handling this because people had been complaining about spammy ads on the site. So just implementing a small change to how the upload process worked actually improved the experience for users and then make the product a lot more attractive to them to use. So that's of course another one. I don't know if you have any examples of improved processes based on data, Natalia, otherwise we're gonna go. And sorry for mispronouncing the name all the time.
No, it's fine. No, we also could improve some processes just internally between the teams, but I think it will be a very long topic and we are over the time. So.
We don't have time for that, but maybe if anyone is interested, they can probably just reach out to you. So the last slide here, I think is super interesting. We should cover that for sure as well, because then, as you say, just to wrap it up, data, of course, now I've been hammering on about the fact that you should always have a goal with the data. But as Natalia says as well, you should always collect as much data as you can as well. You should just not waste the time sitting and looking at it unless you have the time and you have a goal with that. So you are spending a lot of time with AppDev's Institute going through the data and just finding interesting insights. And I don't know if you want to go a little bit more into details with that.
Yes, sure. So before we were talking about some KPIs and the data very much from the business perspective, but we collected really a lot of data, and based on those data, we strongly believe that the gig economy is here to stay. So with all those insights that I was talking about, we built the AppJobs Institute that has really the most in-depth and diverse data for the gig economy. The gig economy is a really young ecosystem in the process of transformation. Therefore, it's really important for us to share information that can help different types of stakeholders, such as politicians, investors, and the industry people, to make decisions that are more informed. And the AppJobs Institute use some external data sets with our cooperations, but most of our analyses are based on fully internal data from our 1.5 million members and platforms to identify those trends in the gig economy. We aim to predict what the future of work will be like. We want to share unique insights about the gig economy. And we talk here about the transformation from working at one company almost your whole life to the working on demand through apps. And if this done correctly, this gives us the ability to choose where and when you would like to work. We associate this with the lower transaction cost that will allow more people to become freelancers and the gig workers. So we want the future of work to be about choice.
I think that's a beautiful premise for sure. So I think this is really interesting, and I urge all of you listening in to go to AppJobs Institute and just check out their the news and their blogs. There's some really interesting reports as well. You just released the Future of Work report, as mentioned, and some interesting graphs. I actually, this whole thing with data, I love it so much, but I can spend so much time, and I think I lost a couple of hours on your website. So so do it, but make sure that you have the time to do it.
I just hear that is the best recommendations.
No, but it's good. It's very interesting. If you have any questions, now is the time to throw them in. I can see I already have a couple. And I'm just going to share the poll, but before I do, I just wanted to answer one of the questions we have gotten in here from Delario. You asked if we will share the PowerPoint slides afterwards. I don't have a problem with that, Natalia. I assume you don't either. So if you want them, you can just throw me an email, and Delario, I'll send you. But if anyone else wants it, you can just send me an email afterwards, and I will forward it to you. I also wanted to just let you know that we're working on a kind of a small checklist outlining the steps as well, and I will send that over sometime during the next couple of days. And also I will send you a link to the recording once that's uploaded, which will probably sometime next week. So you'll get all of that. But as mentioned, if you want the actual presentation, just throw me an email and I'll send it over to you. Let's have a quick look at the poll. So I think you can see it now. We had 75% of the attendees voting, and 67% of you feel overwhelmed with the amount of data, and I understand that as well. I really hope that, I think it's just a reminder really, because everyone knows that they should set tangible goals, but if you do it that way and you just focus on 1 or 2 growth goals at the same time and then align all of the KPIs that you track with that goal, hopefully that will help you a little bit, because otherwise you're going to drown in data for sure. So it's interesting. I was no one is sometimes, so it's either yes or no. Great, so let's just hide this again, and let's see if we have any questions here. Let's see. Just gonna look through this one. There's a kind of a question that is related to this. It's about how much data should you collect, and how do you know whether it's important or not? Natalia, Natalia. I'm gonna work on my Italian. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I mean, as I said, I think you should always collect all possible data, because we found out very often that some data start to have a different importance in the different moment of your company, of the stage of your company. Yes. So, for example, when we were starting the app jobs, we were really trying to make an acquisition of the people from different channels as much as possible. Yes, but later on we obviously tried to improve the funnel, the conversion rate, make sure that these people are the most relevant. So, for example, conversion rate not only from visitor to sign up was also the same important like visitor to someone who's getting a job. Yes, so I think that you always dig more and more to the quality later on. Yes, and some historical data will be very useful to have. It really depends from the context and the stage of the company, I would say.
I would say
everything. I'm data crazy, so I'm really data freak, so for me every data is important.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think you should always collect all the data, but for me it's a matter of where are you focusing at the moment, and that there you come back to make sure that you track it in a way where it's easy to access the data you actually need at that point in time. Because yes, I don't think that you should like turn off X, Y, and Z data collection, but I do think that if you just sit down and you look at your data without having a clear goal, then it's gonna be too much. So I think it's good to know that you're collecting all of this data, but put it somewhere where you don't look at it, and then sit down and say, okay, right now I have this clear goal. I need to collect this, and this data, and I need to, look at that and combine that knowledge. And then all of the other data, put it to side until you actually need it, or until you have time to sit and dig into it to find random enlightenments.
Yes, choosing KPIs and collecting data, it means that at the moment, not all data are KPIs, obviously, and it can be really surprising when you need some data. I would say if we had never collected so many data as we did on the app jobs, I think we could never bring App Jobs Institute. And thanks to all this data, we gained the App Jobs Institute, which obviously doesn't have that much the business goal. We want to be transparent and comprehensive in terms of informations and the insights about the gig economy. There's nothing about the revenue here, but it helped us, for example, to gain really strong domain authority, which is like side effect also. So
that's a positive.
I would say yes.
That definitely worth it, right? Yes. We have a question here from Sam from Colibri. How do you handle false positives in fraud detection, nudity detection, spam filters? Okay, so this is a long and technical explanation, which is probably better handled by some of the guy working with it. But I can give you like a quick overview, and then if you're more interested, I can put you in touch with someone who can go into details. So what we do, for instance, when we set up a filter, we set it up based on our experience, which is quite extensive. We have some really good filter experts and the AI guys as well. But then, of course, once we've done that, we'll go through it very regularly, looking at the false positivity, manually looking through those. and then we will update the filter or the AI based on that. So it's an iterative process over a long time, and the further you kind of go into that process, the better the filter goes. So right now we have, I think it's, 99.5% accuracy on some of the assignment, but it obviously starts from one point, and then the more you iterate on it, the better it becomes. And then there's, of course, and this is one of the reasons why we think it's important to have both humans and technology involved, because there's, of course, times when something new pops up, like for instance with the coronavirus, suddenly medical masks were not allowed anymore because people were trying to utilize the situation in a bad way, and like the best filter, the best AI can't really predict that, right? So there you have to go in and tweak it. But I think this is I'm not the expert here. I will put you in touch with someone who can go into a much more detailed description on how it's done. But it's an iterative process, and then based on expertise, of course, from the beginning. And in terms of AI, it's based on data sets as well. I don't think there's any more questions. Thank you so much for staying with us. It was a really good talk, Natalia. I'm gonna get it right someday. It was a really good chat. I think I could probably talk about data forever, and it seems like you could too. It's such a big topic, and it's such an interesting thing to get out of it. If you're interested in help with content moderation, throw me a mail. But again, I just want to say, go visit the AppJobs Institute. It's super interesting. So, and there's your afternoon.
I also highly recommend. Thanks.
And if you want to contact us, here's our contact details. I almost forgot this most important slide, but again, you can also just throw me an email directly from the invitation, and I will forward to Natalia, but otherwise you can find her on LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening.